Hello and welcome to episode 13 of The Dirty Corner. Now, so far we've covered a lot of unpleasant incidents that occurred at the university, and if you haven't seen them, then go back and watch the other episodes. There's been all kinds of things from violence, abuse, criminal damage, theft, and intimidation, corruption, all sorts of things. In this episode, I'd like to reflect on one of the things that are kind of positive in a way, but what I'm going to be showing you is the artwork that I made whilst I was in art school, despite the curriculum disincentivizing figurative work that I would produce. So that's why this episode is going to be called... I called this episode The Art of Rebellion because you see things like this at university and this is what they want you to make. Ripped up pieces of paper or splashy kinds of artwork. And this is what I started making. This is me starting off a painting the way that they wanted me to start it. They encouraged this splatty, drippy, splashy type of painting, but then it would just be my natural instinct to make it go from that into this. So you can see the process there from left to right, and that's how it ended up. This is just my natural instinct. So if I start with splashes and splatty things and working with leaves and branches like this, like you can see in this picture, it still turns out like this. I make it kind of more ordered and organised in boxes. I just prefer it that way. That is my kind of art. Now, it wasn't all of this kind of stuff, but it was mostly this stuff. But one of the tutors I really liked who left early was this chap in the background who got us to do perspective. And these boxes are ones that he set up for us to draw and just make things out of. So one of the things that I did was I drew them onto a piece of MDF, and I drew it twice. The reason is it fit on the piece of MDF to do it twice, and I'd have two opportunities to cut it out and do something with, and I could maybe stick them together. So that's what I did, is that I cut one out. It didn't work out as good, so I cut the other one out. And it was basically just using a jigsaw, like you can see me doing in this video here. I would drill a hole and then cut into those holes and then cut around the outside. I also painted it. This is in egg tempera, and I enjoyed stuff like that. For one of the talks I did these drawings. This was just so that I had an idea for how to do a talk about the history of the Blackwing Palomino pencil. I'd naturally go into sketchbooks and try to do sketches and paintings of the countryside, because these are the things which I find interesting. It's my local landscape and it's what I wanted to learn and grow and do more of. Now, when you soak the paper like this, you have to leave it for a while, so that's what I was doing. Very drippy, bleedy type of painting at the beginning, but it wasn't exactly watercolour paper. And still, this is how I tried to make art whilst I was in university, because I wanted them to see that this was the way that I was trying to make art, and I wasn't professional at it yet. So I wanted university to really help me build those skills and encourage me to be a better landscape and portrait artist. I had that classical approach to artwork as a real passion and sensibility, and they just wouldn't embrace that at all, and it made me quite disheartened with the course. But the more I would do, the more I would see that they would ignore this type of stuff and they'd praise other things, and I'd start doing the other things just to keep them happy, but I'd still make the type of artwork that I would like, because that's how I would feel more fulfilled. Now again, this is something which is just in a sketchbook, so it's not as though it was something which was framed or ready to go into a wall anywhere, and I should have been doing it on watercolour paper. You can see the paper wrinkling there on the top left, but you know, it's fun and it's growth. It's how you learn these things, and I really enjoy doing paintings like this, because if that were a large piece of paper and in a frame, I think it would be quite a nice landscape, and it's part of the North Wales experience, driving through country lanes. I really enjoyed this, but I made this in spite of their education that they offered. They didn't want me to show them this type of work necessarily. They encouraged performance art and splattery type of art, and I just couldn't help it. So this felt like rebellion. That's why I'm calling this episode that. And as far as rebellion goes, it seems strange to rebel into a more conservative approach, but that's just how it happens for me. If I get pushed in one direction, I will most naturally try to rebel by going in the opposite direction. But it would be different if they would have had a more healthy approach to teaching me unorthodox practices. If they'd show me how they would do it and talk about different artists, I might be more engaged with it. But instead, this was how I did it. And this is some of my sketchbooks from university. So I kept them as kind of a diary for where I was going and what I was doing. And I enjoy it, sketches, little bits of paintings and just ideas. It wouldn't always work out, but that's what sketches are. That's what sketchbooks are for, I suppose. And you can see the boxes there again, the perspective boxes, and just different ideas of portraits, either made up or with a model. I was always trying to keep those skills honed, and this was from the first year at university, so I was still doing a lot of this. But it did become less and less towards the third year because I just felt beat down by their own teaching and how they wanted you to work. Now, some of this is based on either my wanting to do life drawing, that was the watercolour paintings you saw earlier, some portraiture, some ideas with oil pastels, which I quite enjoy, and all types of portraiture and different things that would come my way. It's more of a diary for me, a visual diary of what I was doing day to day. Some master's studies there. I mean, things like this are still really valuable to me because it showed me how my eye would land on certain things and I would find an appreciation for it and then try to replicate it to a certain extent in the sketchbook, and just to familiarise myself with the forms, try to grow my knowledge or react to the pandemic and being locked down into the bedroom or the house or whatever, and trying to do the bin, my little waste paper bin, in a monumental sense. That was one of the ideas for university. A couple more portraits there. What I would do is join online life drawing classes and portrait drawing classes that I would be paying for because university wouldn't provide them. So I was paying for an education separate to university that it wouldn't facilitate. It should have been part of the course. As soon as you enroll for an art education, you would imagine that portraiture and life drawing would come as part of the curriculum, but it wasn't there. So this was all different sessions that I'd pay for because I was just absolutely gagging for a decent education and they wouldn't provide it. So this is how the sketchbook turned out. Now, I don't think that it's especially good work. I just think that I wanted to be better and to try and grow. And if I were around people who would be good at drawing and interested in being better at drawing and painting, or sculptors or whatever you do, then it would have helped me to push my practice further. But when you're around people who are a bit more apathetic, it's hard to motivate yourself and really push into this more elevated state. But sometimes I would even engage with things for the university. For example, this here is a sign that I painted for the Christmas Carol performance that they did, and it's not an amazing sign, but I did that for them, and I ended up painting this. This was a turkey that I made. Obviously it's a pathetic small looking turkey, but that was the idea. And this was a drawing that I did whilst I was in university. I'd take trips out and I had this idea of doing mushrooms, so there's a few of those. But here's the oil pastel pieces that I'd make. I did a couple of them and I quite enjoyed them, but I would always still concentrate on portraiture. This was someone in university who I was sat next to, and this was just trying to do portraiture outside of uni as well, because I would always practice, always trying to grow and improve and just try and feed my own experience, trying to get better at life drawing as well. And I find that those things are really important. This was someone from university, one of the pictures from her Instagram, and I said to her that I'm going to do a drawing of it, and I enjoyed it. This was during lockdown, where it showed how London was deserted because of the pandemic. So I took a still image from the news and started to draw from that still image. Things like that are, a bit of a document of my mindset at the time, and the interest that I found in these landscapes that were deserted. It was a strange time, and I think trying to make sure that we stayed creative and tried to communicate how we felt in different ways is quite important. That's why drawings like this and sharing them online and trying to feel like part of a group would have been really healthy, except I was doing this in a vacuum where, aside from Instagram, there was no one from university who I felt part of a group with who would do these types of things with me, and it was just quite a lonely practice, to be honest. But I felt that quite often, and it's not always a terrible thing. I mean, you can just stay inside of your own head and practice these things if you have to, but usually I'd like to do this among people who I feel have similar interests. When we used to sit in different talks and lectures, I would draw things like this, take in a pizza box and draw this big character. This is specifically one which I drew in university when we were in a meeting about history and context. We were allowed to draw, so it wasn't as though I was misbehaving. When we were in lockdown, I got this new set of pencils by the recommendation of a friend of mine, James Eccleston. He said that to get the Mars Lumograph black Staedtler pens, so I got those, and then I used to always draw on cardboard, so I decided to draw a series of images that seemed to speak to the pandemic, even though the images weren't specifically from the pandemic. It was just people on their own, somewhat isolated, spoke to that mindset for me, and I thought I'd do a series of drawings on this box to communicate how people can be in that space just completely isolated from others. And then because I'm on the coast, I'd always hear seagulls, so I did an image of the seagulls, and then one of a lady drawing the curtains and looking up at the seagulls above. And I quite like that. It's a strange image, but there we are. This is one for university, which was a large piece. It was A0. Nice big black and white piece. So I did do some work for uni, but this is mainly what I do. All these drawings were for me. Things like this certainly weren't for uni, and they were more similar to illustration, I suppose, than they would be for anything for uni. But this was something about the pandemic, you know, making a mask, designing a mask and putting a statement on it about the state of the country. And then I would do additional, more complicated designs for masks and make them a bit more sci-fi, because that would be fun for me. And plus I just quite liked using this set of pens. I like having a colour to the pen, so using what feels like a fine liner and having it in blue instead of black just gave it this different quality to me, really. It was, instead of this hard binary of black or white, to have this not quite as dark tone that the blue offers. Kind of softens the image slightly to me. And still on cardboard, you know, I really do find a lot of comfort drawing on cardboard, and then creating certain labels about the different elements of the mask was just a bit of a playful idea that I had at the time. And yeah, it's just, again, part of this documentation of the mindset at the time of the pandemic, and saying this is the masks that could be useful for us if we have to walk around with different canisters to breathe, or ways to communicate, or just, you know, playful, silly ideas. But that's what you have to do to try and stay positive and creative. So that was one of the different drawings and doodles that I would engage with. But then also paintings. I mean, left unfinished, you can tell that's barely even started. This one's still unfinished as well, but these were some of the ideas that I wanted to do. That one's more of a uni idea, where it's splattery, splashy stuff. And this one with just pieces of paper made into a sculpture. That was for uni, even though it's the silhouette of my Wunderkammer cabinet, which you can see here. This is one of the videos that I made for university. And I actually had a feedback video which I might publish from two tutors, one being the painting tutor and the other one being the dean's wife, giving me feedback on my Wunderkammer ideas. And they're actually both being very positive. And I think that's, I mean, in my view, that's because of the painting tutor being one of the two people, because the dean's wife was always a little, had bits of negative feedback for me in my experience. But for this Wunderkammer feedback session, her and the painting tutor were both being quite complimentary about this, because this idea was several layers. It was first trying to get all of the items onto the shelving, which I arranged and organized, and then I put the shelves in front of a fish tank, but not as you see it there. The fish tank was just about visible on the second shelf, and that's why there's light being projected from the back of the cabinet down the shelving there, is from the fish tank. But then I'd photographed the shelving, and that's where it's from, and I cut it out so that there's holes where each of the shelves are, in between the shelves, sorry, and that's where the fish tank is. So that's how I made that. And doing the same thing, see, that's the photograph that I'd cut out, and then instead of the fish tank I have roads. And that was another idea that I'd had for the Wunderkammer project that we had in uni, was to try to use the shelves to communicate different things, and then also use the videos as a separate element, creating depth and meaning to inject into this project. And they became kind of portals for the journey that you would see. So not only the fish tank idea, where to me that suggested a kind of isolation, just like the lockdown of the pandemic, and the fish tank gave us that. But then, because the things that I arranged on the shelves were partway trying to discuss my journey through life and becoming older and the different influences I had, I felt that the two different car journeys could be a suggestion of that aging process, I suppose, and how that could be represented in video. So it was, one of those artsy-fartsy, pretentious ideas that you do in university, but I enjoyed engaging with the Wunderkammer idea, and I tried to put as much of myself into it as possible. So this is what I ended up with. But that was my 2 Wunderkammer videos for university. So that's part of the art that I can show you. This was one where it was smoke and mirrors, and I was a smoker at the time, so I'd used the morning light coming through the mirrors and then the smoke. This was from a film that I made in still images, and then this was a self-portrait I did on Procreate. Now this video is a bit of a different one. This is more akin to the performance that they would try to encourage at university. This may look like it's a still image, but this was a performance that I was doing for university, and I filmed this. So this is a video that you're watching, and the idea is that I knew, because I did a lot of portrait modelling before university, I knew that I could sit still for quite a while, and I also knew that I can keep my eyes open for a very long time. So my thought of this was to call it a still life, even though a still life is normally a fruit bowl or some glasses and jars or whatever. This would normally be a portrait, but it's a still life because it's a live video and I'm being still, and that's what I called it, was the still life video. And I basically just sat there and tried to sit as still as possible, kept my eyes open, and gave the illusion that it was a still image that was being zoomed into, whereas in reality I'm just sat there. And you may be able to see bits of micro movement if you look very closely, but you will see in a moment when it zooms in very closely that I have to blink at some point at the end of the video. But I did upload this to YouTube a long time ago, but it didn't get many views, and it was one of those ideas that I did for university because of their preference for performance art, and I thought that they'd really enjoy it, and they didn't really engage with it. And then I thought that YouTube would be quite successful, because YouTube seems to like weird ideas, but perhaps it's because I'm not especially good at thumbnails or any kind of clickbait stuff that it didn't get very many views, and the views that it did get, it didn't get much engagement. Plus, I don't think you can really tell what's happening. So anyone watching the video would probably find it quite boring, because it doesn't look like anything but a photograph that's being zoomed in on, I suppose. But this is, as I said, this is just me sitting still and keeping my eyes open. But yeah, it was a strange idea, but at the time, because again it was deep in lockdown, and I'd spent a lot of time on my own and in one room, isolated, this was easy for me to do, and it was quite a pleasant thing in a way because I like the concentration of sitting still and engaging more mindful practices to make sure that I don't fidget and that I don't blink, and trying to focus on one spot on the wall. It's a very strange thing to experience. And if you haven't done it, I say I recommend it. Not everyone, I suppose, can do that, but you'd be surprised what happens in your mind when you try to sit still and focus on one point. Your brain starts screaming to look away and does everything it can to make you look away from that one spot on the wall. But I was insisting on staying focused, and there you go, you can see that I blinked there. So that was one of the performance art pieces that I made for university, and one of the pieces of work I made. Now, I also like doing thumbnails for landscapes, and this was one of the landscape ideas that I had based on videos that I'd filmed about 12 years before I'd done this drawing. And it was from a tour through the Midwest of America that I'd done with my brother, a road trip, I should say. And this was one of the images, a still image from one of the videos, and I'd tried to draw it with different mediums over and over again. So the top left was with pencil, and the one to the right of that would be in coloured pencil. The one below it was in fine liner. The one across from that is in oil pastel. The one below that is in grayscale brush pens. Then across from that is in Conte Sanguine sticks. And then the one which I've just done here is in a black brush pen. And, you know, I just keep doing it in different media. So I did the one to the right of the black brush pen in watercolor, and then below that in the bottom left was fountain pen, and then what I'm doing now is in it's in acrylic. So, you know, it just made it interesting to me to see the same composition done 10 times, you know, in 10 different mediums, because that way you can see how certain materials can heighten the elements of the photograph or the image, and can bring out certain things that appeal to you about the image. Plus, it made me really learn the composition and how to describe the elements in a way which I normally don't experience. So it was quite a good practice, and I should really do it more often, because I think it's nice, and it made a nice one-page spread. And I did try to do it again, but I didn't quite get the impact that this one has, because the next time I tried to do it was from different compositions, and this was all the same composition, which I think has its own charm and power to it. This here is some sketches that I did for paintings that I was going to make, and here are the paintings. So this was a bit of a strange layered idea that I did, and this one again was trying to be built up in different scratchy mark making. Had this strange idea with masking tape that I did for that. This one's just with loose pigment that I tried to push around, and here again shows the loose pigment idea, but for a figurative landscape that I was trying to make of a place called Greek Castle, near to where I am now. It's actually a folly and not a castle, but it's known as Greek Castle. And yeah, it was quite fun. They actually contacted me for a print of this image, so I took that to them because they showed interest online, which was nice. And then this was a life drawing that I did with an eraser, and this was the drawing that I did of the life model. And I do several different portraits from that life model's sessions, because she was the one who would host these either life modelling or portrait modelling sessions. And it would be so valuable for me to have these different models and different ideas. This was more of a cartoony idea, which I still enjoy, and I even tried to make a bit of a cartoon, and this was the ideas for a storyboard of a Boris Johnson calamity idea. I did House of Lords and tried to digitally colour it. I never ended up making it, but I did try to push to get things done. And I'd do cartoony or comic book looking ideas on cardboard. I quite enjoyed them. Or just the raw mark making like this, where it was just hatching, and this is what I'd call texture pages. Then I had this series of still life drawings that I did, and during the pandemic I found this to be very therapeutic, to see if I can have this study of different objects that surrounded me and see if it could describe who I was in a series of drawings. And it seemed to be this collection of still life drawings would become almost a self-portrait because of how it explained what I was drawn to for subjects to draw, but also what I had as a person surrounding me as images. And there'd be lots, from shoes and coffee jar to all kinds of things. So I'll flick through them quickly now just so that you can see. There were lots and lots of different things. It taught me a lot about form and hatching and depth and how to try to make a nice simplistic image and how to try to compose a drawing of with just one object and its shadow. Was quite a fun and educational exercise, so I did enjoy that, and that's all of them together there. So that was one of the Inktober's. I think it was for 2021. This was an interesting image that I took from the pandemic, and then I'd start different ideas. This was one which is a drawing of Boris Johnson on a pile of corpses because of how he'd dealt with the pandemic, and all kinds of different things I tried to get out and tried to communicate, and not all of them worked, but I'd always try to push to make sure that I was still drawing and doing either portraiture or using different mediums, or trying to draw in a way which I found impactful and showed depth and showed an appreciation for what I saw around me. And this is why I found drawing so valuable, and I missed it so much, is that I wasn't having this as an education and painting in university. Instead, I was having encouragement to do performance or something which didn't take talent or skill, which I found strange. So this is another cardboard box where I did the 4 faces with different designs, just improvised. Some sketches of some students there, and just ideas and sketchbooks being filled with whatever I could think of, and pieces of cardboard with strange designs, strange large life drawing with pieces of charcoal, or smaller studies that I'd do in 5 or 10 minutes, and then trying to do several poses on one piece of paper. It was all really valuable to me. Even trying to do it with pen like this was a very interesting commitment that you have to make, because you obviously can't erase pen, so you just have to try to make it work. And drawing like this was a lifeline for me, because everything else that I was getting from university would be this type of splatty stuff. That's why I did these drawings, was because of my frustration with the people at university. And then when they told us to do this video Wunderkammer, that was the students' work there, which they'd put up. That's their pieces that represented them. And mine, because I was in such a bad and dark place, was this piece in the bottom right-hand corner here. This was what I had to represent me in this video of Wunderkammer for university. So that, to me, says quite a lot about the mind state and emotional state that I was in at the time of being at university and how difficult I found it. So that is the work that I produced whilst I was in art school. I was intending on producing a video about a meeting that occurred with an external examiner. That's going to take a bit more work, so I've put that off. It might be next week, but we'll see how it goes. It's at the moment it's a 50-minute long video that requires subtitles, so I'll see how my time management works out this week and see if I can do that. But with other jobs that I have going on, it's quite a demanding workload. I hope you enjoyed this episode. All of the stories that I'm telling you will lead to the Dirty Corner, and the final episode will outline why this series has that name. If you can relate to anything and you've got any feedback or any comments about anything that I've discussed or shown in any part of the series, then please leave a comment down below. Also, liking the video really helps, and subscribing to the channel if you're not already subscribed is obviously a great support to the channel, and I hugely appreciate it. But I appreciate you watching, so thanks for that, and I will see you in the next video.